Guys, all right, so we are going to continue with 6.1. We are now going to solve quadratics by factoring. So we should already know how to factor. Remember, I said this is going to come back for us. So making sure that we remember how we were factoring would be perfect. So what are the parts of the parabola? So what we're going to talk about right now is parts of a parabola. Okay, this ax squared plus bx plus c, we've seen this before. We've called that the quadratic that we're factoring. But if we were to graph it, it would look like this u on the graph. Here's our x-axis, here's our y-axis, and we call this the parabola. Okay, there are certain things that we are going to talk about, and we will touch on it more next unit. But just real quick, the line that cuts this down the middle in half, like we could literally fold this in half and it would be the same on each side. This is called the axis of symmetry. Axis of symmetry. Remember, symmetry is more of a geometry term, but we know it's cutting it in half. We can also call this the AOS. All right, another thing down here, the lowest point or the highest point on our graph is called the vertex. All right, and then we have these points where it crosses our x and y axis. So those are called our intercepts, our x-intercepts, y-intercept for our graph. X-intercepts, y-intercept. Normally there's only one y-intercept. Sometimes there's one x-intercept, sometimes there's two. And then when we are solving, actually, so the next part of this, when we're solving, we are actually solving for those, oops, I meant to grab purple, for those x-intercepts, okay? So we're solving for the x-intercepts. The other thing that we can call them, or the other name that we can call them, we also can call them the zeros, because technically if x equals, say, 1, our point that is on the graph is really 1, 0. Okay, so those are our zeros. So like this one, x is 1. This one over here, x is 3. So we would say 3, 0. All right, another thing we can say is our solutions to our quadratic when we're solving by factoring. All right, so then there's some steps, and I'm going to type them in here for you. Make sure you are writing them down. So when we're solving by factoring, we do have steps to solve. Number 1 is to make sure it is written in standard form. All right, and that standard form, remember, still a little too big. Remember that standard form is that ax squared from the top up here, ax squared plus bx plus c. So that's what we want it written in when we are factoring. Okay, oops. The next part that we're going to do, or the next step, number 2, is to take out any GCFs, any greatest common factors. When we're factoring, we always want to make sure that we are doing that in case there are any GCFs. The next step then is to factor. Use the method that you like the best, okay? We have learned a few different methods, the box method, factor by grouping we kind of talked about, but not really. And then the divide by A method. So I'm going to show the divide by A method today while we're doing this so that you can see that again. Once we have it factored, we're going to set each factor equal to 0. And that's when we're using that zero product property that we were talking about before last week. When we had those, it was already set up in the 2 parentheses. That's what we're talking about. And then we're going to solve for the variable. Once each one is set equal to 0, we're going to solve for the variable. So those are those 5 steps. What I would do is pause the video and write them down and make sure you have them written down so that you know what they are going to be. All right, the next page, example number 1. So I'm going to do 3 examples, and then at the end you will have one to try on your own that we will check together in class. So 6a squared, I should have typed these in before, plus 12a equals 0. So when we're solving these quadratics, they're always going to be set equal to 0. This first one here, making sure that we know, okay, is it in standard form? So ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Well, yes, it is in standard form. The only other thing is it doesn't have a c value. So when it's 2 terms like this, we know, okay, the first thing we want to do is take out a GCF. Okay, so what can I divide both of these numbers by? 6 and 12. Well, I can divide them both by 6, and then they also both have an a. So that goes outside of my parentheses. When we factor using a GCF, we take that and put that outside, and then we divide it out. So 6 divided by 6 goes away. If I have 2 a's on the top, but I took 1 out, I'm left over with 1, plus 12 divided by 6 is 2, and then my a's actually went away. Okay. For this now, my next part is to set these both equal to 0. So 6a equals 0, a plus 2 equals 0. So going back to, this is our 0 product property. Okay, or we just call it ZPP. Easy way to do it. And then I'm going to solve for a. So divide by 6 here, divide by 6. 0 divided by anything is 0. And then minus 2 minus 2. A equals -2. So this is just telling me, if we go back to looking at that graph that we talked about at first, this is just telling me that my parabola or my graph is going to hit my graph at 0 and at -2. So it's going to cross that x-axis at 0 and -2. So it might look something like this if we just sketch it quickly. Okay, so that's one that you're just factoring out a GCF. If we go to the next example, now remember, you can pause these at any time. Our next example will be n squared minus 6n plus 8 equals 0. Okay, so let's go ahead and solve this. Now this one, there are 3 terms. It is A, B, C. So this is in standard form. So what we want to do is we want to write out, okay, what's my A, what's my B, and what's my C. So A is 1, B is -6, and C is 8. So when we're factoring this, we need to make our x A times C at the top, B at the bottom. So A times C, 1 times 8 is 8, and -6 at the bottom. When we're doing this, we need to find the factors that multiply to 8, but add to be -6. So if we list out our factors, 1 times 8, 2 times 4. We did watch a video that if the top number is positive, that we want to think of adding these factors. So 2 and 4 is going to give me 6. But since the bottom is negative, we want both of these to be negative. Okay. The trick, or the way we can do this, when A equals 1, which it does over here, right? We can check that. We just write them in our double bubbles with the variable. Okay, so we take our factors and write them in there. N-2, N-4. since it is set equal to 0, we do need to set this equal to 0. And then we split them. N minus 2 equals 0. N minus 4 equals 0. So just like we were doing last week, add 2. So n equals 2. Add 4 for the second one. N equals 4. So there are our two answers for those. Okay, so when we're factoring, actually going through and making sure that we factor, we find those factors that add or multiply, we put them in our parentheses, and then we split them and set them equal to it. All right, so from this point over here on, it's the same as last week. Now we're just actually finding those factors for problems. All right, last example here. 3x squared minus 27 60 equals 0. So right away I see, okay, these numbers are a little bit bigger. Our first thing we want to do is always check to see, is there something I can divide these numbers by? Okay, and there is. I can divide them by 3. Whoops, I changed my colors. So that goes on the outside. Now, not all of them have an x, so I'm not going to take an x out, but then I divide. 3 divided by 3 goes away, so x squared. 27 or negative 27 divided by 3 is negative 9x. And then 60 divided by 3 is 20. Okay, now we factor this like normal, right? Just this part we factor. A equals 1, B equals negative 9, C equals 20. Make our x. 1 times 20 for A times C is 20. B, negative 9. So factors of 20, again, this one is positive at the top, so we're going to see what can I add together. If you have your factor sheet, you can use your factor sheet. But which ones can I add together to get 9? Well, 4 and 5, right? So 4 and 5, but since this is negative, they both need to be negative. All right, again, look, our A is 1, so we can put the 3 out, and then in my parentheses, or like that one video called it a double bubble, we need to put my variable with my factors. Okay, so 3 times x minus 4 times x minus 5. Then at the end, we split each group to equal 0. Well, 3 equals 0. That doesn't make any sense, so we don't have to worry about that one. X minus 4 equals 0, and then x minus 5 equals 0, and solve for that. Add 4 to both sides. X equals 4. Add 5 to both sides. X equals 5. So my graph is going to cross at 5 and 4. So that means this one would be a really skinny parabola. Okay, the last one that I would like you to try on your own. We're going to do a U try, and it's going to be x squared plus 7x equals 0. All right, have a good day. Once you finish this video, you can go on to the second video and get that watched, and then finish up the tasks for the rest of the week. Bye, guys.